spent the last 3 decades of his life restoring natural vegetation in a lost salmon run to a ruined watershed. Beale had a bad case of post-traumatic stress disorder, and the trash heap that Ham Creek had become looked too much like the load of garbage he was carrying around inside himself. He decided to do something with his own hands and on his own time, and his relentless efforts eventually attracted international attention and prestigious awards. But Beale wasn't looking for attention. He was looking for healing. His efforts to restore this small tributary to the Duwamish became his own therapy, and by the late 1980s he was seeing salmon use the creek again. Native vegetation now abounds in the area. According to Mike Sato of People for Puget Sound, watching the single-minded gusto with which Beale threw himself into this restoration, quote, made you want to get down next to John and get your hands dirty too, because working with John at Ham Creek was like going to church, unquote. I see great blue herons feeding from the muddy banks by the creek's outflow. A pair of ospreys swoop down onto the decayed pilings in the river, and lots of waterfowl have found their way back to this part of the river too, oblivious to the posted signs warning bottom fish, crabs, and shellfish may be unsafe to eat due to pollution. Part of me wants to warn them off, but I also take solace in the fact that they are here at all, that like John Beale, they refuse to give up their river or deprive it of their own life, come what may. So now moving into the paddle section, I'll just read a couple brief excerpts from the paddle section. It's been 3 days on the I've been 3 days on the paddle since when I reached Hope Island in Skagit Bay. The steady swish and swing of the stroke is gradually taking residence in my body, like a physical chant that pulls my mind to the margins of time. I'm too immersed in the repetition to notice how monotonous it is. In the ancient logic of travel across water, reverie seems to win out over boredom in the end. Small things reach out to grab and hold my attention. The pattern of tiny eddies from each paddle stroke as they recede into my wake, the lift and sway of the kayak in the choppy waters, the riptides that keep my senses alert. Deception Pass is right around the corner where Skagit Bay gives out into open water, and the current can clock 8 knots at peak tide going through the pass. The narrow neck between Hope Island and Alla Spit offers my first clue that acceleration of current has begun. And a few days later in the trip, after my daughter Kristen and friends Jay and Robin had joined me, we're camped on Posey Island, getting ready to cross Harrow Strait into Canadian waters. Tonight we are camped on the far edge of the San Juan Archipelago, facing another open expanse of water. Tomorrow I will leave my home circle for the first and only time this year, rising for a dawn passage over Harrow Strait. The native canoes will make the 6-mile crossing later in the day, accompanied by a fleet of support vessels. Secure in our own small encampment for the evening, we hear the native drums pounding late into the night in Roach Harbor, pulling us across the threshold into sleep on mysterious currents of myth and legend that can never finally be torn from the heart. In the morning we launch with the sun just as it rises from its mysterious lodging behind Spiden Island. We set off in calm waters, skirting the narrow channel between McCracken Point and Battleship Island that issues us out into the open waters of Harrow Strait. To the south is the yawning expanse of the Strait of Juan de Fuca, with distant alpenglow over the snowfields of the Olympic Mountains, 40 miles away. Everything about this place feels big and slightly menacing. Forests of bull kelp send their bulbous heads and long sweeping fronds in the direction of the current, helping us gauge its bearing and speed. Giant barnacles cling to the rocky shores, creations of the ocean conditions that often pummel this exposed shoreline. Halfway through our crossing, the wind kicks up suddenly from the south, coming up the long fetch of the strait, and a sharp swell is not far behind. Soon the wind is blowing steady at 15 to 20 knots, and we find ourselves wedged in the narrow trough of the waves. We plant and pull with each stroke, plant and pull, rising and falling like tiny corks. Our paddle strokes offering the only traction and stability we have on the water. The swell begins to crest in whitecaps that rise up beside us, but there is no turning back. From my vantage so close to the water, the other boats appear and disappear in the alternating peaks and troughs. Each stroke is a running conversation with the wave at hand, and there are no two waves alike. Braced by the cold, salt wind, we push ahead. There is no resolution for this conflict, but the next pull of the paddle. The same wind that blows the lid off these waves blows our sense of time out the window. Almost without realizing it, we pull the distant shore ever so slowly toward us. I'll close with a couple of paragraphs toward the end. Everything changes. It has always been so. Our lives pass swiftly away. To be human is to swim in a sea of intertwined beauty and loss. Yet the losses we now contemplate are of a different order of magnitude, beyond the imaginings of any former generation of human beings. In the daily scramble of love and work, it is easy to miss the scale of what we face. It is easy to confuse our climate crisis with a litany of lesser ills we simply would rather ignore. Yet it is not the human way to surrender what is most precious to us without rallying the full measure of our courage and fortitude to the cause of its survival. This is the moment of truth into which all previous generations have delivered us. With the fate of all future generations now resting in our hands, imagine. We have entered a perfect storm of our own making. The living earth on which we sail, the cradle of all homelands and all possible homecomings, is in grave danger of sinking. Every hand is needed on deck. What greater adventure could anyone ask for?